Funeral farewell, a solemn funeral. Loved ones mourn the man's passing. Rain fell like a veil over the cemetery. The sky was an endless canvas of gray, and each raindrop tapped against the canopy, with a rhythm as steady as the hearts breaking beneath it. The funeral had begun in silence, save for the occasional sob or the shifting of wet umbrellas. A modest gathering of family, friends, and neighbors had come together to mourn the loss of Matthew Tran, a 32-year-old schoolteacher who had died suddenly in a car accident just 2 weeks earlier. The news had struck like lightning, no warning, no sense. One moment he was there, driving home from his night class. The next, his car was wrapped around a tree on Old Creek Road, his body lifeless in the wreckage. A simple wooden casket rested beneath a thin covering of white lilies, his mother's favorite flower. It looked too small to hold the person they remembered, energetic, full of dry humor, always the first to help out when someone in town needed a hand. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Tran, stood shoulder to shoulder, holding hands tightly as the priest murmured blessings. Matthew's younger sister, Eliza, stood near the head of the casket, fingers trembling as she held onto a photograph of them both from when they were children. The photo's edges had worn soft from years in her wallet. The priest's voice rose slightly. And though we do not understand why God calls some of us home so soon, we trust in His will, and we commend Matthew's soul into His eternal care. The crowd bowed their heads. No one moved as the casket was slowly lowered into the earth. The sound of soil hitting the wooden lid was almost unbearable, final, irreversible. Behind them, the trees swayed gently in the wind. But those who lingered a little longer might have noticed something strange. The wind had stopped. The trees stood still. And somewhere beyond the veil of rain and grief something watched. That night, the Tran household sat in near silence. A few friends had come by after the service to drop off food, share stories, and offer comfort. But by 10 o'clock the house was quiet again. The living room remained dim, a single lamp casting an orange glow across family photos, flowers, and untouched coffee mugs. Mrs. Tran sat stiffly on the couch, her face drawn, staring at the darkened television screen. Mr. Tran, always the strong one, busied himself with putting dishes away. It was easier than stopping to think. Eliza, her eyes still red, had curled up in the recliner with the same photograph tucked against her chest. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," she whispered. "Like this is a bad dream." No one responded. There was nothing to say. The house felt colder than usual, though no windows were open. Upstairs, Matthew's room had been left untouched. His shoes still sat neatly by the door. His flannel shirt still hung over the back of the chair. His phone still charged had 3 unread texts, and a missed call from Eliza sent just minutes before the accident. At 2:17 a.m., the hallway light flickered on. No one had flipped the switch. 2 weeks later, family has just begun to grieve and move on. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't come all at once. It arrives in waves, some slow and dull, others sharp and crashing. The Tran family had started to return to a fragile sense of normalcy, though the house still felt quieter, heavier. Mrs. Tran had begun watering the plants again. Mr. Tran returned to his morning walks. Eliza, who had taken time off work, went back to teaching part-time at the local elementary school. There were small signs of healing, laughter, though brief, shared meals, remembered stories. It helped to talk about him, not just the way he died, but the way he lived. But there were odd things too. Sometimes they heard footsteps upstairs when no one was home. Twice, Mrs. Tran found the porch light on in the middle of the day, though no one admitted turning it on. And on more than one occasion, Eliza swore she heard the front door creak open at night, only to find it locked tight moments later. They chalked it up to nerves, imagination, old house creaks, the weight of grief, until the night someone knocked. The knock one stormy night Someone knocks on the front door. It was the kind of storm that rattled windows and made even the dogs in the neighborhood fall silent. Thunder cracked low and deep across the sky like the earth itself was groaning. Inside, the Tran family sat in the living room, lights dimmed, sipping tea and listening to the heavy rain. Eliza was the first to hear a sharp, clear knock at the front door, 3 times. Not loud, but steady. She sat upright. Did someone just? Mr. Tran nodded. I heard it too. He got up and walked cautiously to the front door. The porch light flickered once, then stayed on. Another knock, 3 times. He looked through the peephole. His breath caught in his throat. There, standing on the front porch, drenched from head to toe, was Matthew. His skin was pale, lips slightly blue, eyes distant. But it was him. Mr. Tran stumbled back, confused, frightened, trembling. Eliza, he called, come here. She hurried over, then froze. That can't be. But it was Matthew, just standing there. He looked straight at the door, eyes dull and unblinking, and said something they couldn't hear over the storm. Mrs. Tran rushed in behind them. One look and her hands went to her mouth. He's come home, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. It's him, the dead man stands outside live. But strange. They opened the door slowly. Matthew stood motionless, his clothes formally folded inside his coffinware now soaked and clinging to his frame. Water pooled at his feet. He looked thinner, somehow, hollow. Eliza, he said softly, it's me. His voice was low, not quite right, like someone trying to remember how to use it. She stared, couldn't speak. Mrs. Tran stepped forward first. Matthew, is it really you? He nodded. Slowly, I woke up. I didn't want to leave. I just came home. No one moved for several seconds. Then Mr. Tran said, this is impossible. You're a were. He couldn't finish the sentence. I know, Matthew said. But I'm here now. Please. I'm so cold. 2 weeks later, family has just begun to grieve and move on. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral. Time, as they say, doesn't heal, it numbs. The Tran family moved through their days like shadows of themselves, clutching at small routines in an attempt to outrun the weight of their grief. Mr. Tran returned to walking every morning before sunrise. The neighborhood was quiet then, and the cool air gave him something to focus on besides the hollow ache in his chest. He no longer passed the corner store where he used to meet Matthew for coffee. He took a longer route now, more out of instinct than avoidance. Mrs. Tran began tending the garden again. She watered the potted orchids Matthew had gifted her the year before, trimmed dead leaves from the bougainvillea, and sat in the rocking chair just outside the kitchen window each evening. She didn't cry as much anymore, but she didn't smile either. And Eliza tried her best to live. She resumed teaching at the elementary school, though the kids' laughter sometimes felt jarring now, too sharp, too alive. She would sit in her car for 10 minutes each morning before stepping into the building, giving herself pep talks through the rearview mirror. Today is normal, she'd whisper, you're okay. At home, they rarely spoke about Matthew anymore, not because they wanted to forget, but because every memory felt like a jagged stone, slicing through the moment. His room was still untouched, his bed still made, his guitar leaned silently in the corner. His books were exactly where he had left them, in the nightstand, on the floor, under the bed. There was a stillness in the house, not just from mourning, but something quieter, deeper. A presence, the kind you feel rather than see. Sometimes, when one of them was alone, they'd catch themselves turning to look behind them, half expecting someone to be there. No one ever was. At night, the house creaked more than usual. It was an old house, and old houses made noise, they told themselves. But even old houses didn't whisper. The first whisper came to Eliza just 3 days after the funeral. She had fallen asleep in the recliner, the television playing softly in the background. Sometime past midnight, She stirred not because of the TV, but because someone had murmured her name. Eliza. She jolted upright, heart pounding. The room was empty. The TV screen glowed a pale blue. Her parents had long since gone to bed. She waited, listening. Nothing. She shook her head and laughed softly, more to convince herself than anything else. Tired, she muttered. Just tired. But the next night, it happened again. This time in the hallway, outside her bedroom. Eliza. A whisper, close almost behind her ear. She turned the lights on immediately, searched the hallway, checked her parents' rooms. No one else had heard it. She didn't mention it to anyone. What was she supposed to say? My dead brother is whispering to me in the dark. Then came the door. 1 week after the funeral, the front door was found slightly ajar early in the morning. Mrs. Tran had woken first and noticed the cool breeze drifting through the hallway. When she walked downstairs, she found the door open just a crack too small to be a break-in. Too odd to dismiss. She called her husband immediately. Did you forget to lock the door last night? He frowned. I double-checked. I always do. I heard it click, Eliza added. I was right here in the living room. They checked for signs of forced entry. Nothing. No mud. No scuffs. No footprints. The cameras outside had been broken for months. They had meant to fix them, but never got round to it. They agreed to keep it locked from both inside and outside now, just to be safe. But it happened again, 2 nights later, and again 3 days after that. Each time, the door would be found slightly open, just enough to let the wind in, just enough to suggest someone or something had been there. By the second week, the whispers weren't just in Eliza's head. Her parents had begun hearing things too. Mrs. Tran heard footsteps in the hallway when no one else was home. Mr. Tran swore he heard someone humming in the basement while he was folding laundry. Even the cat, Moki, had taken to staring at empty corners of the room, ears flattened, tail puffed, a low growl rising in her throat. She's never acted like this, Eliza said one night, watching Moki bolt from the kitchen as if chased by something unseen. She's scared. Cats are sensitive, Mrs. Tran whispered. They feel things we can't. Mr. Tran remained silent, but Eliza noticed the way he slept now with the bedroom lamp still on. Then came the porch light. One Tuesday afternoon, Eliza arrived home from work and immediately noticed it. The porch light was on. Middle of the day. No reason for it. She frowned and stepped inside. Mom, did you turn the porch light on? No, her mother called from the kitchen. I haven't touched it. Dad, I was in the garage all morning, he replied. Didn't even go near it. Eliza stared at the switch near the front door. On. Firmly. She turned it off. But that night, just before bed, it was on again. Did you? She began, but Mr. Tran cut her off. I didn't touch it, he said, not even looking up from his book. They stared at the light in silence. Eventually, they stopped asking. There was a growing sense of wrongness in the house, a weight that pressed down on them in quiet moments, a chill that no heater could fight. It wasn't grief anymore. It was something else. It felt like waiting, like the house itself was holding its breath. On the 13th night, Eliza had a dream. She stood in the middle of a field vast, colorless and quiet. There was no sky, only darkness above. She turned in slow circles, trying to find something, anything familiar. That's when she saw him. Matthew stood across the field, facing away from her, still, silent. Matthew, she called. He didn't move. She ran to him. Her feet didn't make sound against the ground. When she reached him, she grabbed his arm. He turned. It wasn't Matthew. It looked like him, but the eyes were all wrong, glassy, black, endless. His mouth opened, but made no sound. Instead, something whispered from behind her. He didn't come back. Eliza woke up screaming. Her scream woke both her parents. They ran to her room and found her trembling, covered in sweat, eyes wide with terror. Nightmare, she gasped. It was just a nightmare. But she knew better. It wasn't just a dream. The next morning, as they tried to move on with their day coffee, radio, newspapers, Tran went to check the mailbox. She screamed. The others came running. There, in the mailbox, tucked neatly between an electric bill and a flyer for a car wash fundraiser, was an envelope. No stamp, no address. Just one word written across the front. Eliza. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph. An old, unfaded, grainy, a family photo taken years ago at the local lake. She recognized it immediately. Only one thing was different. Matthew, in the photo, was staring directly at the camera. Eyes pitch black. No one else in the image had pupils. Just him. That night, no one slept. They sat together in the living room, too afraid to be alone. Every creak of the house made them jump. Every gust of wind sent shivers through their bones. At exactly 3:03 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks, then silence. The knock one stormy night. Someone knocks on the front door. The sky cracked open. Lightning streaked across the night like claws slashing through velvet. Thunder followed, a long, rumbling growl that shook the glass in the Tran family's windows. Rain pounded the roof in relentless sheets, as if the heavens were trying to drown the world below. The house sat in darkness, save for one dim lamp in the corner of the living room. Mr. Tran sat upright on the couch, wide awake despite the late hour. Eliza was curled in the recliner, legs tucked under a blanket, eyes fixed on the flickering screen of the muted television. Mrs. Tran paced slowly by the front window, looking out into the storm like she expected it to reveal answers. No one had slept since the envelope, since the photo of Matthew with eyes as black as ink. It was nearly 3 a.m. The air inside the house felt heavier than the storm outside, oppressive, as if something invisible was sitting in the center of the room, waiting for its moment to speak. Then it came. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps at the front door. The room froze. Eliza sat up straight, her heart thundering in her chest. Mrs. Tran stopped pacing, her breath caught mid-inhale. Mr. Tran stood slowly. "Did you hear?" "I heard it," Eliza whispered. Again. Knock, knock, knock. This time louder, closer, sharper. Mrs. Tran's voice shook. Who would be out in this storm? No one, Mr. Tran muttered. Not at this hour. He walked to the front door cautiously, each step like a drumbeat in the silence that followed the thunder. The porch light flickered once, twice, then held steady. He peered through the peephole and gasped. "Eliza," he called, "come here." She joined him hesitantly, glancing at her father's pale, stunned face. He moved aside. She looked through the peephole. Standing on the porch, soaked through and unmoving, was a figure she knew too well. Drenched brown hair, familiar jawline, faded red hoodie, jeans with a tear in the knee, shoes they had buried with him. Matthew. Except it wasn't Matthew, or it wasn't the version she remembered. His face was eerily still, his eyes glassy, lips slightly parted as if he were about to speak but forgot how. Water dripped steadily from his clothes, pooling at his feet. He didn't shiver, he didn't blink. He just stood there and smiled. But it wasn't a smile of relief. It was a thin, strained thing, stretched across his face like it didn't belong there. Mrs. Tran appeared beside them. She took one look through the peephole and gasped. "He's come back," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "He's come back." "No," Mr. Tran said firmly. "No, this isn't right. This can't be." Eliza's hand was trembling as she reached for the doorknob. "Don't," her father warned. "But it's him. It looks like him," he said. "That doesn't mean it is." Another knock, this one louder, as if it were impatient. They stepped back. "Please," the voice came softly from behind the door. "It's cold. I'm so cold." It was Matthew's voice. Exactly. Too exact. Eliza felt her breath catch. "Did you hear that?" Mr. Tran nodded. "He sounds the same." Mrs. Tran had already reached for the lock. "Stop," Eliza shouted. "We don't know what's out there." Mrs. Tran turned to her, eyes wide and glistening. "That's my son. My boy is out there, soaking wet, in the middle of a storm. I'm not going to let him freeze." But before she could open it, another voice cut through the air, deep, hollow. "He's not yours anymore." They all froze. That voice hadn't come from the porch. It had come from inside the house, from upstairs. Silence fell so thick it felt alive. Then creaking, slow, deliberate steps moving down the hallway above them. Mr. Tran turned toward the stairs. "No one's up there. Is anyone up there?" But they already knew the answer. The creaking continued, step by step, across the wooden floorboards of the second level. A dragging sound followed, like something heavy being pulled behind. Eliza looked at her mother. "You still want to open the door?" Mrs. Tran stepped away from it, shaking. The no more knock, but this time, not on the door, on the window. Eliza turned. Outside the living room window, through the rain-smeared glass, Matthew stood once more, or whatever looked like Matthew. His hand rested against the pane, palm flat, fingers splayed. He tilted his head slightly, and smiled again. Mr. Tran grabbed the phone. No dial tone. He checked the screen. No signal. The lights flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them like reaching arms. Moki, the cat, bolted across the hallway, hissing violently at the empty stairwell before disappearing into the laundry room. "We have to leave," Eliza said. "Right now." Mr. Tran nodded. "Grab your shoes. I'll get the car keys." But just as he turned toward the garage, a boom rattled the walls. The porch light went out. The front door slammed open with a deafening crack. Wind howled into the house, scattering papers and knocking over a lamp. And in the doorway stood the thing wearing Matthew's face. His eyes were no longer glassy, they were pitch black, endless, and gleaming like oil. His skin had paled further, almost translucent, with bluish veins spidering across his neck and arms. His voice was hollow now, split into two tones, Matthew's soft voice and something far deeper layered beneath it. "Let me in," Eliza screamed. Mr. Tran grabbed the fireplace poker, but before he could move, the thing stepped across the threshold. It hadn't been invited, and yet it entered anyway. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Their breath fogged the air. The walls groaned. The figure looked round slowly, its eyes locking on each of them in turn. Mrs. Tran stepped forward. "Matthew," she whispered, voice cracking. "Please, if it's really you." He tilted his head again. His lips moved, but what came out was not a reply. It was a low, guttural growl. It didn't come from his throat. It seemed to vibrate from inside the house itself. Then he moved. Fast, unnaturally fast. One moment he stood in the doorway. The next, he was in front of Mrs. Tran, face inches from hers, smiling that same awful smile. She didn't scream. She just trembled. Eliza stepped between them. "Leave her alone." The creature turned its head toward her slowly, like a machinian sniffed the air. Then it said, in Matthew's voice again, "You called me. You asked me to come back." Eliza's stomach dropped. She had. The night after the funeral, she'd sat in his room, in the dark, with tears streaming down her cheeks. She had whispered again and again, "Please come back. Please, I miss you. I need you. Please." She had begged, pleaded, and something had listened. The entity stepped back. "You opened the door long before tonight," it said, "and now you want to shut it." Mr. Tran raised the fireplace poker and charged. The creature didn't flinch. Instead, it raised one hand and the poker flew from Mr. Tran's grasp, clattering across the room. Mrs. Tran screamed. Eliza grabbed her mother and pulled her toward the stairs. "We have to get out." They fled to the back door, yanked it open. The yard was covered in fog. Dense, unnatural. It curled in shapes, moved like it was breathing. Figures stood just beyond the tree linoon moving, watching. Shapes of people or things once people. Eliza slammed the door shut. The lights in the house went out. Total darkness swallowed them. And from the pitch black came a single whisper. I came back, but I wasn't the only one. It's him. The dead man stands outside Eliv. But strange. The storm outside had calmed. But inside the house, the silence was deafening. The Tran family huddled near the staircase, the back door shut tight behind them. The living room was still bathed in darkness, save for the occasional flicker of lightning outside. Every breath they took was visible in the frigid air, hanging like smoke. They didn't speak. They couldn't, because he was still standing there. Matthew, or something that looked exactly like him. He stood just past the front door, one foot inside the house, the other still on the porch. His body was soaked to the bone, but he didn't shiver. His clothes clung tightly to his frame-jeans hoodie, the same outfit they had buried him in. He looked up at them with a soft, hollow smile that didn't reach his eyes, and the eyes that was what truly gave him away. They were too black, too still, not lifeless. Wrong. Eliza took a shaky step forward. Matthew? The figure tilted his head slightly. The movement was slow, stiff, like he wasn't used to his body. Eliza, he said. The voice was soft, familiar. It sounded like him, just enough. I came back. The way he said it made her blood run cold. There was no emotion in it. No relief, no desperation. Just a statement of fact. I came back. Mrs. Tran clutched her daughter's arm tightly. Her voice was a whisper. It's him. He's come back to us. No, Mr. Tran said flatly. Look at him. He stepped in front of them protectively. The figure turned its eyes on him. Again, that smile. I know you're afraid, the thing said gently, but I'm still me. I remember everything. Eliz's 12th birthday, Mom's red dress from the Christmas party, Dad yelling at me when I crashed the car. Mrs. Tran gasped. That's true, did crash the car when he was 17. Eliza stared hard. How do you know all that? I remember, he said again. I'm not a ghost. I'm not a demon. I'm Matthew. But he didn't blink. Not once. His hair was still dripping. The puddle beneath him hadn't spread. Mr. Tran reached for the cross, hanging near the stairwell. It had been there since before Matthew was born, blessed by the priest after Eliz's fever. When she was 6, he held it in front of the figure. Nothing. Not a twitch, not a wince. Matthew or the thing wearing him stepped fully into the house. The wooden floor creaked under his wet shoes. No, Mr. Tran said firmly. You can't be here. Dad, the figure said. I came home. No, he repeated. Whatever you are, you're not my son. The figure paused. Then its head tilted again, slightly more crooked this time. The smile faded. You buried me, it said. You said goodbye. We did, Eliza whispered. You died. I saw you. But you didn't let me go, it replied. Silence. Eliz's breath caught, because she remembered. She remembered sitting on his bed the night after the funeral, begging desperately. Foolish life for him to come back. Just once. Just long enough to say goodbye. You called me, it said, and so I came. Lightning flashed again. For a split second, his reflection appeared in the window behind him. Only it wasn't his reflection. The figure in the glass was taller, thinner, hollowed out like a corpse. Its eyes glowed. Its mouth gaped open, impossibly wide. Then darkness returned. Mr. Tran took a step back, holding his family close. You need to leave. But the figure simply stood there, rain still dripping from his sleeves, mouth now curved into something colder than a smile. I'm tired, it said. I walked a long way. I just want to rest. I want to be home. You don't belong here, Eliza said, louder now. The figure looked at her, not with anger, not even sadness, just confusion. "I thought this was what you wanted," it whispered. "I wanted my brother back," she said. "Not you." The lights flickered again. The air turned sharp like breathing through ice. Then, something strange happened. The figure began to shudder. Not violently, but like it was glitching. Like its body was flickering between forms. As if the illusion was wearing thin. One moment, it was Matthew. The next a shape made of shadow. Then back to Matthew again. Mrs. Tran screamed. Mr. Tran pulled them both toward the stairs. The figure fell to its knees. "I didn't ask for this," it said. "I didn't want to come back. But something else did." Eliza stopped mid-step. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I wasn't alone," it whispered. Suddenly, a crash from upstairs. The sound of footsteps fast and heavy running across the second floor. Eliza turned. More footsteps. Too many. Then came the laughter. Childlike. Distant. Echoing. As if coming from inside the walls. The figure on the floor still flickering. Still wet looked up at them with wide, terrified eyes. "It followed me," it said. "It came through with me. It didn't want to stay behind." "What is it?" Eliza cried. "I don't know," the thing said, now weeping tears that weren't water. "It lives in the in-between. In the space between memory and grief. And when you called me, it heard." Mr. Tran turned to his daughter. "We need to send it back." "But how?" The figure looked up at them. "There's still time," it whispered. "But not much." Its skin was peeling now. Not from decay, but from light, like its form was burning from the inside. Its voice cracked. "Burn my clothes," it said. "The ones you buried me in. They're still in the casket. It's a tether." Mrs. Tran gasped. "You want us to dig up your grave?" The figure nodded. "That's how it's holding on." The family stood frozen in the living room. The thing that had knocked on their door now knelt before them, not as a monster but as a warning. Behind them, the walls of the house groaned. Eliza felt it again, that weight, that pressure in the air. It wasn't done. Whatever had followed her brother back, it wasn't finished yet. Suddenly, a scream from the second floor. A woman's scream. Mrs. Tran clutched her chest. "Who was that?" "No one else is here," Mr. Tran said. But they all knew better. The scream came again, closer now, louder. The creature on the floor raised a trembling hand toward Eliza. "You have to hurry. I can't hold it back anymore." Its body began to convulse. Black liquid, thick and oily, seeped from its mouth. Its voice dropped into a deeper register. "It's here." And then it collapsed. Not unconscious. Not dead. Just still. The lights blew out at once. Every bulb in the house shattered in unison. And from the upstairs hallway, something began descending the stairs. One step at a time. Slow, deliberate. Eliza grabbed her father's arm. "What do we do?" He looked toward the figure on the floor. Then at the stairwell. Then at her. "We dig." Refused entry, he begs to come in. The family hesitates, frightened. Rain beat hard against the roof as the storm returned in full fury. Like nature itself was warning them. The windows quivered in their frames, and each thunderclap rattled the walls of the Tran household. But inside, it was not the storm that frightened them, it was what now stood motionless just beyond the threshold. He looked like Matthew, drenched from head to toe, barefoot, hoodie clinging to his thin body. His face was pale, skin almost translucent under the porch light. His lips trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something deeper. Something wrong. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Let me in." The front door was open halfway. He hadn't stepped through, not yet. The way he lingered in the doorway made Eliza's stomach knot with unease. He could come in, but he hadn't. As if something was holding him back, or something was waiting to be invited. "I just want to come home," the figure repeated. "I'm cold. I don't remember where I've been." Mrs. Tran stepped forward. "It's him," she said shakily. "Look at his eyes. He's scared. My boy is scared." "No," Mr. Tran said. "There's something wrong." He kept his body between the figure and his family. His hand was clenched tightly round the small wooden cross he'd grabbed from the stairwell earlier, though it offered little comfort now. Eliza stared at the person who looked like her brother. Same crooked smile. Same iced how the color seemed off. Darker, duller, deeper. "Tell me something only Matthew would know," she said. The figure blinked. "Eliza, when we were kids, I let you win a Connect Four every single time." "That's not enough," she whispered. "Tell me more. You had a nightlight shaped like a cloud. You were scared of thunder. You used to sleep with a bear named Captain Naps." Mrs. Tran let out a breathless gasp. "That's him. That's my Matthew." "No," Eliza's voice cracked. "That's memory. Anyone can repeat memories. That doesn't make him real." The figure took a small step forward, but still didn't cross the threshold. "I woke up alone," it said softly. "Buried, cold, forgotten. I clawed through dirt. I walked miles. I followed the smell of home. I heard you crying for me. You asked me to come back. I was grieving," Eliza whispered. "I didn't mean like this." Thunder shook the house again. The lights above flickered. Inside, the temperature dropped again, sharp, biting, unnatural. Their breath fogged the air. The floorboards creaked even though no one moved. "I don't want to be outside anymore," the figure said. "Please, let me in." "You're not him," Mr. Tran said quietly, eyes narrowing. "You sound like him. You look like him. But you're not Matthew." The figure's smile faded, and something else showed beneath it, an expression that didn't belong on any human face. A flicker of something old, something angry, something hungry. "I came all this way," it said. "You begged me. Now you're afraid." The door shuddered slightly on its hinges. Eliza's hands curled into fists. "Why haven't you come inside already?" "I'm being polite," the thing said. Mrs. Tran turned to Eliza. "Why won't we let him in? If it's not really him, then what is it?" Eliza swallowed hard. I think it's waiting for us to invite it. Like in the old stories. You can't come in unless you're asked. That's why it's asking." The figure tilted its head slowly, unnaturally far. "Eliza, don't you want your brother back?" She flinched. It took another step, right to the edge of the doorframe. Rain poured off his sleeves. His eyes gleamed. "I remember the day you broke your ankle," it said softly. "I carried you to the hospital. You were screaming. Remember, I told you not to cry, even though you were shaking. You said I was your hero." "Stop it," she whispered. "You said I was the only person who ever made you feel safe. Stop. I'm still that person." "No, you're not," Mr. Tran said firmly. "You're wearing his face, but you're not my son." The thing sighed. Then, in a voice that was no longer Matthew's, it growled, "Then let me in and I'll show you who I really am." All at once, the lights in the house surged blindingly bright and exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness swallowed the room. The porch light burst above the figure's head, glass raining down around him. Mrs. Tran screamed. When their eyes adjusted, the figure was still there. Only now, it was changing. The hoodie darkened, melting into shadows. The skin twisted, sloughing away in places to reveal something darker beneath. The smile widened far too wide for any human face. The teeth were too many, too sharp. The eyes, gone, just two gaping holes of pulsing black. "Is this better?" it hissed. Mrs. Tran collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "No, no, no." Eliza grabbed her mother and pulled her backward. Mr. Tran reached behind him and pulled open the hallway closet, tossing a container of salt toward Eliza. "Draw a line," he shouted. "Now." She didn't hesitate. She dumped the salt across the doorway, one solid white line between the figure and their home. The creature stepped forward and stopped. It hissed. The salt sizzled at its feet like acid. It glared at them, hate now fully replacing the imitation of sorrow it had worn like a mask. "You kept the door open," it growled. "You called me. You cried for me. You invited the grief. "But we never invited you," Eliza snapped. She held up her mother's rosary and a photo of Matthew from his graduation day. "This is my brother," she said. "Not you, never you." The creature's body twitched. Cracks formed in its skin like porcelain under pressure. Shadow poured from its joints. Its voice broke into 3 tones at once. "You can't send me back. I belong now." "Not here," Mr. Tran said, his voice low. "Not in this house." The creature shrieked. The sound was like glass and metal and screaming souls combined. Every wall in the house shook. Picture frames crashed to the ground. The air buzzed with energy, and the darkness twisted around them like living mist. Then suddenly it stepped back. The figure grinned once more. Not a smile of victory, but of cruel patience. "Fine," it hissed, "but you'll open the door again. Grief always does." And with that, the figure turned and vanished into the storm, swallowed by the fog waiting at the edge of the yard. For a long time, no one spoke. The family remained frozen, staring at the empty doorway. Rain still fell. The porch was empty. The night felt hollow and quiet. Eliza finally moved. She closed the door, locked it, bolted it, and then sat down with her back against it, shaking. "He wasn't lying," she whispered. Her parents looked at her, eyes wide. "I did ask him to come back. I didn't know it would invite something else." Mr. Tran knelt beside her. "You didn't cause this, Eliza." "Yes, I did. Grief opens the door, but we never shut it." Mrs. Tran sat down on the floor, wrapping her arms around both of them. "Then let's shut it now." They sat there, the 3 of them, surrounded by broken glass, flickering shadows, and the deep knowledge that something had come to their door, and it had not left empty-handed. "Eyes aren't right," his expression is blank. His eyes seem hollow. The next morning dawned with an eerie stillness. The rain had stopped. The wind had vanished. The clouds hovered like a low ceiling above the Tran house, casting everything in a lifeless gray. But inside, things weren't calm. They were broken. The living room was a mess: hattered bulbs, scorched lamp cords, overturned furniture. Mr. Tran swept up glass with stiff hands, eyes darting occasionally toward the front door, which remained shut, locked, and now reinforced with a bar. Eliza sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. Her hands trembled slightly, the aftershock of the night still vibrating in her bones. Across from her, Mrs. Tran clutched a faded photo album, eyes swollen and red. She hadn't spoken much since the creature left. "He looked like him," she murmured for the 5th time that morning. It was his voice, his smell, the way he stood. "It wasn't him," Eliza replied softly. Mrs. Tran didn't argue. She just looked down at the photo of Matthew holding a sparkler on his 12th birthday. "His eyes were always full of mischief," she whispered. "But last night there was nothing." Eliza nodded slowly. His eyes weren't right. They weren't even empty. They were hollow, like there was something else looking out. From the hallway, Mr. Tran called out. The attic door was open. Eliza stood instantly. "What?" "The latch is broken," he said. "There are footprints in the dust." They joined him in the hallway, where the ceiling panel hung open slightly. A fold-down ladder rested at a crooked angle, as though someone had climbed down hastily or not at all. Mr. Tran pointed to the dusty floorboards. Bare, wet footprints led away from the attic toward the guest bathroom and stopped. Eliza knelt and traced a print with her finger. It was cold, damp, too fresh. "We locked the front and back doors," she whispered. What if it didn't leave? The house turned quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Tense, listening, watching. They searched the house from top to bottom. Nothing. No sign of the thing that had come wearing Matthew's skin. No claw marks, no more footprints, no pools of water. Still, something felt wrong. Off, like the air itself had teeth. Later that evening, Eliza sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Her thumb stopped on an old photo. Matthew standing beside her at the beach, both of them grinning, wind-blown laughing. His eyes sparkled. That photo felt like it belonged to a different life. Then, a ping. A text. Unknown number. Eliza, I made it back. Let me in. She dropped the phone. Her heart seized. Another ping. Unknown number. It's cold. I'm alone. I don't remember how I died, but I remember you. She picked up the phone with trembling hands. The typing bubble appeared, and then, unknown number. I can see you. You haven't changed. Eliza ran to the window. There was nothing outside. She checked the locks again. The doors were sealed, curtains drawn, every mirror in the house now covered with sheets. Just as Mr. Tran had ordered, an old superstition from his grandmother. He said spirits could use reflections to anchor themselves. Eliza turned off her phone, put it in a drawer, sat back down. But she couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. Black, hollow, hungry. What had really come back? That night, Eliza dreamed. She stood in the house bed. Everything was wrong. The walls were breathing. The pictures whispered. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should have. She saw Matthew down the hallway. Matt. He turned. It was him. Kind eyes, familiar face, soft smile. Eliza, he said, you left me. No, you died. I couldn't save you. You didn't try, he said. His voice shifted, distorted, echoing. You left the door open. You let it in. She backed away, heart pounding. Matthew stepped forward. His face began to rot, peel, sag. His eyes turned to dark, empty holes. You called it with your grief. And then dozens of hands reached out from the walls, clawing, grasping, pulling. She screamed. Eliza woke with a jolt. Sweat poured down her face. Across the room, her closet door was open. She never left it open. She stepped cautiously out of bed and peered inside. Nothing but clothes and old boxes. Still, she shut the door and slid her dresser in front of it, just in case. The following morning, Eliza checked her phone. 7 missed calls, all from Matthew. She didn't answer them. Instead, she opened her voice memo app and recorded a note. July 10th, day 3. He's still trying to reach us, through doors, phones, dreams. His eyes weren't right. If anyone finds this, don't open the door. She saved the file and sent it to a hidden cloud folder, then turned off her phone again. Around noon, Mr. Tran returned from the church with an elderly priest named Father Din. He didn't say much, just nodded quietly as he stepped inside and examined the space. He paused near the front door, then touched the frame lightly. She let something in, he said softly. Eliza tensed. You mean me? He looked at her with anger, but deep sympathy. Grief is not weakness, he said, but it is a doorway, and some things wait for doorways. He opened a small tin and began spreading ash and crushed herbs across the windowsills and door frames. Then he turned to them all. Tonight, do not speak to it. Do not answer the door. Do not look into its eyes. Why? Eliza asked. Because it learns, he replied. The longer it's here, the more like him it becomes. The more memories it steals, the more real it seems. Mrs. Tran's face went pale. What does it want? Father Din stared toward the stairwell. A place to live, a body to wear. That night, the knocking returned. 3:03 a.m. Soft rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. Mr. Tran rose from the living room floor, where he'd been sitting in vigil with a candle. He didn't speak. He didn't move toward the door. He simply whispered, "It's testing us." Eliza joined him. The family stood silently. Again. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice. "Dad." Mr. Tran's eyes filled with tears. "Don't," Eliza whispered. "Mom." Mrs. Tran turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. "Eliza, please, I'm scared." Eliza closed her eyes. "Don't look at it." They stayed quiet. The knock returned louder now. "Why won't you let me in?" Then came the laughter, high-pitched, guttural, childlike and ancient at the same time. It echoed through the vents, through the floors, through their bones. Eliza opened her eyes. A dark shape stood at the window now, watching through the curtain. Its eyes glowed faintly, but only for a moment. Then it was gone. Morning came slowly. Gray light crept into the corners of the house like an apology, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a warning. Father Din sat at the kitchen table, rosary in hand. "It won't stop," he said quietly, "until you give it what it wants." "And what is that?" Mr. Tran asked. Father Din looked at Eliza. "You." She froze. "Why me?" "You were the one who called it." "I didn't mean to, but you meant it," he said gently, "and now it's bound to you." Mrs. Tran shook her head. "There must be another way, a ritual, a prayer." "There may be," Father Din said, "but it must be done at the grave, where it started." "And what if it's already inside?" Eliza asked. "What if it never left?" Father Din looked down at the rosary in his hands. "Then we pray it forgets how to look like him." Eliza turned toward the hallway mirror, still covered with a white sheet. Behind it, she imagined not her own reflection but his, smiling, empty, watching. No shadow someone notices. He casts no shadow under the porch light. The night had returned, not just in time, but with intent. Everything about the darkness outside the Tran family's house felt unnatural now, to thick, to quiet, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Even the wind had died. No crickets, no rustling trees, just silence. Inside, the family moved like ghosts through their own home. Sleep was useless. Food had no taste. The house wasn't just haunted, it was watched. Eliza stood in the upstairs hallway, clutching a candle. The flame flickered, though there was no draft. Downstairs, Mr. Tran finished nailing shut the final window in the living room. Father Din remained in the kitchen, praying under his breath in a language older than memory. Mrs. Tran was in Matthew's room again. She had returned to it in secret over the last few nights, sitting on the edge of his bed, whispering apologies to the dark, hoping something would answer her that didn't come with black eyes and a hollow voice. But nothing ever did. Not yet. 9:40 p.m. The knocking hadn't returned, but something else had. This time, it was a humming, a low, tuneless, broken little melody. They heard it at different times, in different rooms, soft, barely audible, like it came from inside the walls. Eliza heard it first in the bathroom. Mrs. Tran heard it through the heating vent. Mr. Tran through the drain in the kitchen sink. And none of them could agree on the tune, because it changed, always just slightly, familiar, but wrong. 10:10 p.m. The lights outside the house flickered, then held steady. Eliza pulled back the curtain by the front door. Fog clung to the porch. The motion sensor light glowed faintly, casting a circle of pale yellow onto the concrete. And there he was, Matthew, standing under the porch light, exactly like he had the first time. Same hoodie, same jeans, bare feet soaked, head bowed like a child who had come home too late. Only this time, she saw it, and froze. "Dad," she called softly, "come here." Mr. Tran joined her at the window. "What is it?" "Look at him," she whispered. "Look under his feet." It took a moment, but then Mr. Tran's eyes widened. There was no shadow. The porch light shone directly overhead, bright, steady, inescapable. But the figure beneath it cast nothing. No silhouette, no outline, not even the faintest blur on the concrete. "He's not casting a shadow," Mr. Tran said. Eliza's voice was barely a breath, "because there's nothing there to cast one." The thing raised its head slowly and smiled. They backed away from the window. "Salt the threshold," Mr. Tran whispered. They moved quickly. Eliza scattered salt in a perfect line across the front entrance. Her father reinforced it with a circle at the center. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The fear had turned clinical, now measured in steps, in rituals, in rules. Salt, silence, shadow, or lack thereof. 11:07 p.m. They heard it again. That voice. It was still Matthew's voice, soft, pleading, careful. I'm still me. Eliza sat on the couch with her hands clenched into fists. You're not, she whispered to no one. The voice moved, as if walking alongside the outer walls of the house. It's cold. I'm tired. I just wanna come in. Mrs. Tran pressed her palms over her ears. You let me in once. You asked me to stay. Eliza shook her head. I didn't know what I was asking for. 11:31 p.m. The lights in the house dimmed. Just a flicker. Then a slow, steady hum began, low and mechanical, vibrating through the floorboards like an old engine. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the entire house was breathing in time with something outside. Eliza stood and walked toward the door, not to open it, just to look, just to see. She peeled the curtain back again. Matthew still stood on the porch, still smiling, still shadowless, but now his arms were outstretched, palms open, like an invitation or a surrender. Eliza reached up and touched the glass. The temperature dropped instantly, so cold it burned her skin. She pulled her hand back. Frost had spread across the inside of the glass in the shape of a handprint. She gasped, stepped back. The smile outside widened. 11:47 p.m. Father Din emerged from the back room with a small satchel in his hand. I've prepared something, he said. He laid the satchel on the kitchen table. Inside was a sealed envelope, a single black candle, and a piece of paper covered in Latin script. What is it? Mr. Tran asked. A warning, the priest said, and a promise. He handed the black candle to Eliza. If it comes again, if it stands at the door and will not leave like this, but only once. Eliza took it. The wax was cold, heavier than it should have been. She didn't ask what would happen when it burned. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. 12 a.m. The knock came. Not on the door, but the roof. A single, solid thump. Then another. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps, walking across the shingles above them. Eliza looked up slowly. Mrs. Tran whimpered. Mr. Tran stepped forward with the cross again, hand shaking. The knocking stopped. Then, scratching, like nails on wood, circling the ceiling, moving from room to room. It was inside the attic again, or beneath it, or everywhere. Then, silence. The candle in Eliza's hand flickered, though it hadn't been lit. And then the voice returned. Eliza. Her name, spoken with warmth, with familiarity, with sorrow. You were the only one who missed me enough to call me. That means something. That means we belong together. She clutched the candle tighter. The voice dropped an octave. Let me show you what's waiting for you. Suddenly, all the windows in the house fogged over at once. Every reflective surface went white with frost. And in each one, Eliza saw him. Matthew, or what he wanted her to believe was Matthew, standing inside the reflections. No shadow, no soul. Just hollow eyes, staring. Then, just above a whisper, you only have to say yes. Eliza stepped forward, raised the black candle to her lips, and blew gently. The wick ignited instantly. The flame burned violet. A pulse of heat burst through the house like a heartbeat. Every reflection shattered. The mirrors cracked. The frost peeled back. The voice vanished. And from outside, silence. 12:03 a.m. The porch was empty. No figure. No shadowless man. Just fog, slowly receding. And beneath the porch light, this tiny puddle. A footprint, but only one. Inside, the candle flame continued to burn violet, impossibly steady. Father Din nodded solemnly. It's gone, he said, for now. Eliza didn't speak. She looked toward the front door, where the salt circle remained undisturbed, and the shadow had never come. Whispers at night after his return. Strange whispers fill the house. It started on the third night after the candle burned, just after 2 a.m. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint, almost inaudible sound like someone breathing softly from another room. Then the breathing turned to humming, and the humming into whispers. The Tran family had thought the worst was over, that whatever wore Matthew's face had vanished into the fog, with the breaking of the candle's violet flame. But evil, as they would soon realize, does not always knock twice. Sometimes it settles in quiet lilac dust, like rot. It waits, and it whispers. The first to hear it was Mrs. Tran. She woke up in the dark, the moonlight stretching faint lines across the bedroom ceiling. Mr. Tran lay beside her, snoring gently. She turned toward the door, sensing something, and that's when she heard it. A voice, right outside the room. A breathless whisper. "Mom." She sat up, heart stalling in her chest. "Matthew," she whispered into the darkness. The hallway was empty. Silence. Then, "Mom, it's me." She stood and crept to the door, fingers trembling as they wrapped around the handle. She opened it just an inch. No one was there, but the whisper came again closer now. "Why won't you talk to me?" She slammed the door shut and backed away, pressing her back to the wall. She didn't sleep again that night. The second to hear it was Eliza. She was lying awake in her bed, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Pictures of Matthew, their childhood, the beach trip last summer, trying to remind herself who her brother was, not what she saw now. She turned off the screen and closed her eyes. Then, tap-a-tap-tap, at her window. She opened her eyes. Nothing but fog and night beyond the glass. And then, a voice, low and steady. "Eliza, I'm still out here." She sat up, holding her breath. The voice didn't stop. "I know you're awake." She grabbed the black candle from her nightstand. The wick was burned out. The flame was gone. "I miss you," the voice said. She shut her eyes tightly. "No, you're not him." And then the whisper changed. Deeper now, cruel. "You miss me." Mr. Tran heard it next, but not from the hallway or the windows. He heard it through the walls. He was in the basement, organizing storage boxes, trying to clear space for the priest's protective markings. That's when he heard the voices. Whispers from the brick wall behind the boiler. Faint at first, then clearer. "Matt, hi, ba." It was counting. In Vietnamese, like a child playing hide and seek. "BBNNCM Sao." He moved closer, pressed his ear to the cold cement. Then silence, and the no more whisper. "Found you." The lights in the basement blew out. He ran upstairs without looking back. They called Father Din again. He returned the next evening with holy water and a bundle of charred herbs. His face was drawn, tired. He didn't ask for details, could feel it in the air. The house was no longer neutral. It had become a mouth, and it was starting to speak. "The veil hasn't closed," he said grimly, "when you lit the candle. You pushed it back, but it wasn't banished. It's still nearby, still hungry." Mr. Tran clenched his jaw. "So it's trying to wear him again?" "No," the priest replied. "It's trying to wear you." That night, they all slept in the living room. Salt across every entrance, candles placed at each corner, every mirror still covered. Father Din kept vigil, whispering prayers in Latin and Old Vietnamese. But even the prayers couldn't silence the whispers. They began around 2:33 a.m., soft and staggered, from different corners of the house, like someone whispering from behind the walls, or inside the vents, or from the back of your mind. Mrs. Tran clutched Eliza's hand tightly. The whispers grew louder, repeating the same words, over and over. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Then, silence. Then, a scream. Not from outside. From the hallway. A child's scream. High, pure, piercing. And then the voice again. "I'm cold. I'm sorry. Why won't you hold me?" Eliza covered her ears. "Make it stop. But Father Din didn't move. He looked toward the fireplace. The shadows there had started to move. 3:12 a.m. Mr. Tran stood up slowly, walked to the center of the room. "This isn't working," he said. "If it can whisper, it can listen." "Eliza, what did you say the night after the funeral?" She looked up, startled. "What? When you asked him to come back? What did you say?" She hesitated. "Out loud, say it again." "No. Eliza, say it." She closed her eyes and whispered, "Please come back. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't mean it. Just come home, one last time." The whispering stopped. Total silence. Then, from the fireplace, a slow, wet sound, like someone stepping barefoot onto the hearth. And then, a voice, clearer than ever. "Okay." The flames went out. The candles all died. And something stepped into the room. They couldn't see it, but they could feel it. Colder than anything natural, heavier than fear. It moved across the room, unseen but undeniable. Mrs. Tran's breath frosted midair. The mirror behind the piano cracked though it was still covered. And then Eliza saw it. A reflection. Just for a second. In the TV screen. Matthew, standing behind her. His face half missing. His eyes black pits. And his mouth wide open, whispering. But the sound came from inside her skull. "You said goodbye, but I didn't." Father Din stood up and threw the last of the ashes into the air, shouting a prayer in full force. There was a screeching sound, metal grinding, teeth snapping, glass shattering from within. The whispers turned to screams, voices layered on voices, begging, mocking, laughing. Mrs. Tran dropped to her knees. Eliza clutched her ears. And then, sudden stillness. The flame returned to the black candle. Violet, calm, steady. They all stared at it and realized it had chosen. The next morning, they found writing on the bedroom walls. Not scratched, not painted, just appeared. Tiny, looping letters. Words repeated across every surface, every language, all saying the same thing. "Don't forget me." Father Din said little. He packed his things. He looked tired, broken. But before leaving, he touched Eliza's shoulder. "It's still here," he said. "But it can't take you unless you invite it again." She nodded. "So what now?" He gave her a small, faded book. Inside, old protection rights, candle markings, a journal. "It feeds on memory," he said. "But memories are your weapon, too. Use them, write them. Remember the real him." And then he left. That night, Eliza sat in Matthew's room. The candle burned beside her. She opened the book, and she wrote, not for the thing outside, but for her brother, the one she missed, the one with mischievous eyes and a terrible singing voice, the one who once said, "If I ever die, don't bring me back. I'd be a terrible zombie." She smiled through tears and kept writing, because the whispers would return. But now, she had something louder. The truth. Animals react. Pets refuse to go near him. They growl or hide. The Tran family hadn't owned a pet since before Matthew died. Their golden retriever, Lucky, had passed away the year prior at 15 years old, a gentle, aging soul who once followed Matthew everywhere like a loyal guardian. After the funeral, no one mentioned getting another dog. The house had enough ghosts of its own. But that changed when Mrs. Tran brought home the cats from the local shelter. She claimed it was for comfort, quiet companions, something living to focus on. Their names were Tofu and Shadow, a soft gray tabby, and a fluffy black long hair with amber eyes. Both were gentle, calm, until he returned. The cats were the first to know. That morning, as Eliza sat at the dining table reading from the book Father Din had left, Shadow suddenly bolted across the room, tail puffed, ears flat. She hissed long, loud, and jumped up onto the highest shelf, knocking over a framed photo of Matthew. It shattered on the floor. Tofu followed suit moments later, leaping onto the counter and ducking into a cabinet. Meowing in distress, Eliza ran over. "What's wrong?" she whispered, approaching Shadow slowly. The cat pressed itself against the wall, growling at something invisible behind Eliza. She turned. There was no one there. Not yet. Later that afternoon, Mr. Tran was reinforcing the locks again. He walked in from the garage holding a box of old tools. Shadow, sitting near the hallway, immediately began growling. It was a low, guttural sound none of them had ever heard from her. Tofu ran and hid under the couch again. Mrs. Tran bent to scoop her up, but Yelped Cat swiped at her wrist, deep enough to draw blood. "She's never done that before," she whispered, stunned. "She didn't mean to," Eliza murmured, eyes fixed on the hallway. "She's just scared of something we can't see." That night, the fog returned. Not outside but inside. The house turned icy, every window beating with moisture from the sudden drop in temperature. The thermostat stopped working. The air was sharp and heavy, and with it came that old feeling again, like they were being watched. Tofu and Shadow ran from room to room in erratic patterns. They hissed at corners, arched their backs at nothing, swiped the air violently as if batting away something crawling close. Then, around 10 a.m., the meowing started. Not cries for food, not for attention, but warning. Loud, desperate, screeching. Eliza ran downstairs to check on them. Tofu was on top of the fridge, eyes wide, pupils dilated. Shadow stood at the front door, tail flicking back and forth, raised along her spine. She was staring through the glass. "Eliza," Mrs. Tran called from upstairs. "Are you okay?" Eliza took a slow step forward and followed Shadow's gaze. Then she saw it. Just a shape, a silhouette, standing in the fog beyond the porch. It was back. The figure didn't move, didn't knock, didn't speak, but it stood in the exact place Matthew had the first time. And again. No Shadow. Eliza backed away, whispering to Shadow, "Come on, girl, let's go." But the cat didn't move. Her growling stopped. Her body froze. Then she slowly turned her head, eyes locked with Eliza's, and hissed at her. Eliza flinched, her chest tightened. Shadow leapt down and disappeared into the laundry room. The next morning, they found strange marks near the baseboards in the hallway. Long, thin scrapes, like claw marks, only not from the cats. Too straight, too deep. Some curved in ways no animal could make, and all of them seemed to form circles concentric, deliberate, like something had been scratching symbols into the wood. Father Din had warned them. It learns, it adapts, it listens. Now, it was responding, marking the territory it believed already belonged to it. Eliza spent the afternoon drawing new protection symbols over every doorframe. She lit sage. She scattered more salt. She read aloud from the prayer book, though her voice shook. Tofu lay curled up beneath the stairs, refusing food or water. Shadow didn't leave the laundry room. The animals had stopped reacting like pets. They were acting like witnesses, as if they saw something terrible trailing behind each family member like smoke. Around dusk, Eliza went outside for the first time in days. Just for air. Just for silence. She sat on the porch swing, looking out into the yard. Everything looked normal, but felt wrong. The swing creaked beneath her. Crickets chirped half-heartedly. The wind barely stirred. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a bell. Not a church bell, not a doorbell, but the faint jingle of a collar. She turned slowly and saw a golden retriever walking across the far side of the yard. Eliza's heart stopped. Lucky. He looked just like their old dog, but he'd been gone over a year. She stood, breath caught in her throat. The dog turned toward her and growled, low, loud, directly at her. Then he vanished. Not ran, not walked away, just disappeared. Eliza stumbled back into the house and slammed the door shut. That night, The cats refused to stay in the same room as Eliza. Wherever she went, they avoided her. If she entered the kitchen, they'd dart out. If she sat on the stairs, they hissed from the landing. Even when she sat silently on the floor, hands outstretched, whispering, "It's me, it's Eliza, I'm not him." They didn't trust her. They didn't see her. And in that moment, Eliza felt it too. That maybe something had begun to cling to her. An echo, a residue, like a hand resting on her shoulder just a moment too long after the dream. Mrs. Tran cried in bed that night, not because she was afraid of the ghost anymore, but because the animals were acting like the boy she lost was already back in the house, and they didn't like what they saw. 2 days later, Shadow disappeared. They searched everywhere. Inside closets, under furniture, behind the water heater. Nothing. No fur, no tracks. Just gone. Tofu wandered the house meowing, calling for her but always in the same direction, toward the basement. They didn't open it. Not after last time. Not after the breathing they heard behind the boiler. That night, Eliza dreamed again. She stood in the backyard. The fog parted. Matthew sat on the swing, smiling gently. Shadow lay in his lap. He stroked her fur slowly. "She came to me," he whispered. "She knows where I am." His face turned toward her, but the smile didn't stop, even as his teeth lengthened, even as his eyes went black, even as Shadow's body slowly unraveled in his lap, her fur peeling like paper. "You're next," he whispered. Then the bell on Shadow's collar jingled once, and Eliza woke up screaming. She sat upright in bed, gasping, covered in sweat. Tofu was nowhere in sight. The hallway light was flickering. The black candle on her dresser had turned to ash. She looked toward the closet door. It was open. Inside, a collar, with no bell. He doesn't sleep, he's always standing, always watching, never blinking. The nights were no longer marked by hours, only by him. No matter what time it was, no matter who was watching, was already there. Matthew, or the thing wearing Matthew's face. It started with shadows in the hallway. Then came the standing, motionless, silent, always near but just far enough to deny. Eliza was the first to notice it. 3 nights ago, she'd woken up at 3:41 a.m. and turned over to grab her water bottle. The room was quiet, still, but as her eyes adjusted to the dark, she saw something outside her door just past the cracked frame. A silhouette, just standing there, head tilted slightly. She froze. "Dad," she whispered. No answer. She watched for what felt like minutes. The figure never moved, never swayed, never blinked, just stood. In the morning, no one else had seen anything, but Eliza could feel it in her bones. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting. The following night, Mr. Tran set up a small camera in the upstairs hallway. Just a simple motion detector cam with night vision. He said it was for peace of mind. The next morning, they checked the footage together. For the first 4 hours, nothing. Then, just past 2:17 a.m., a shape entered the frame. It was tall, male, barefoot. Matthew's face was partially visible under the night vision filter, but the eyes were the most disturbing part. Wide, fixed, never blinking. He stood directly in front of Eliza's door for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Never moved, never sat, never blinked. And then at 6:30 a.m. he turned around and walked back down the hallway without ever making a sound. Eliza vomited in the sink. "He doesn't sleep," Mr. Tran said quietly, staring at the screen. Mrs. Tran whispered, "He never used to sleep much, remember? Always stayed up late gaming." "That wasn't standing in hallways," Eliza snapped. "That wasn't watching me breathe for hours." Mrs. Tran said nothing after that. That evening, they left the living room light on. Eliza refused to close her bedroom door. Shadow hadn't returned. Tofu no longer left the couch. And Matthew? He was now everywhere but never moving. Standing at the end of the driveway. standing in the backyard, standing in the upstairs hallway mirror, just behind your reflection, always watching, always waiting. The strangest part wasn't the fear, it was the stillness, the absolute silence of him. No footsteps, no breathing, no blinking, no signs of life, just that dead stare. Once, Eliza tried to speak to him. She opened the front door, just a crack just enough to peek outside. He stood at the edge of the porch, wearing the same clothes, the same soaked jeans, the same hoodie, mouth closed, eyes too wide. "Eliza," he said, "I don't sleep because I don't want to miss a second with you." She slammed the door before he could finish, but she swore the words had echoed inside her skull, like he wasn't speaking out loud, like he didn't need to. Mrs. Tran stopped sleeping altogether. She would sit in her rocking chair facing the window with a crucifix in one hand and a rosary in the other. One night, Eliza walked into the room to find her staring through the glass. "Mom," she asked. Mrs. Tran didn't move, just pointed toward the yard. "He's watching the house again." "How long?" "I don't know," she whispered. "He's been there since sunset. Hasn't blinked." Eliza reached to pull her mother from the chair, but Mrs. Tran's hand clamped around her wrist. "When he starts blinking," she said, "then you run." 2 days later, the electricity started failing. Not out in the neighborhood, just in their house. Lights flickered when he was near. Batteries drained faster. Even the analog clocks slowed down. Time bent. Or maybe he did. They tried to lure him in with trap spiritual ones. Symbols, salt, incantations from Father Din's book. But he never crossed the lines. He never stepped inside. He never touched the walls. He didn't need to. He was already here. Somewhere between. Eliza woke one night to the sound of static. The old baby monitor her parents had kept on us for years was buzzing on the table beside her. She didn't even remember plugging it in. She reached for it slowly. The static faded, and then a voice. "I'm in your room." She turned slowly. He was there, standing in the far corner, just behind the closet. Same posture, same face, same unblinking stare. She blinked and he was gone. Only the candle on her dresser flickered once, then steadied. By the 6th night, Eliza stopped fighting sleep. She knew it didn't matter. He would still be there, still watching. And every time she opened her eyes, he'd be closer. Not physically, emotionally, inside. She began hearing him in her dreams. Not like before. Not whispers. Not illusions. But clear. "Come. You don't need to sleep either, Eliza. You and I could watch forever. Time is just a window. All you have to do is close your eyes and choose to open mine." Tofu stopped eating entirely. She just lay in the same spot for days, eyes tracking something invisible on the ceiling, sometimes meowing at nothing, sometimes backing into corners. Eliza found her one morning curled up at the center of the salt circle by the front door, limp, cold, but still breathing, just barely. Mr. Tran buried her that night, but something strange happened. When he looked up after the last shovel of dirt, Matthew was standing at the edge of the woods, watching. They called Father Din again. He didn't answer. They visited the church. The building was empty. A neighbor said Father Din had left unexpectedly. No note, no goodbye, just packed and vanished. They tried calling the police, but how do you explain it? Our dead son keeps standing in our yard and never blinks. They didn't even finish the sentence before hanging up. On the 7th night, Eliza decided to confront him. She waited until 3 a.m. She opened the front door and stepped outside. He was there, standing in the middle of the yard under the streetlight. She walked slowly, barefoot, each step louder than the last. He didn't move, didn't breathe. She stopped 5 feet away and whispered, "You're not him." He blinked once and smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. His face looked more masked than skin. Too perfect, too intact, like he hadn't decayed at all, like nothing ever had. "You're learning," he said. His voice was wrong, too smooth, too rehearsed. "I never said I was him," he added. "You did." Eliza backed away. "You invited me," he said again. "Every time you begged for him, every tear, every scream, every memory. You carved me into your grief." He tilted his head slowly. "I'm yours, you made me." The porch light blew out. Darkness. He stepped forward. 1 inch. No sound. Eliza stepped back, but he didn't follow. He just watched, never blinking, and whispered one last thing. "You don't have to sleep, not anymore." The real grave a family member checks the grave. The coffin is still sealed. Grief clouds the mind. It twists memories, it softens facts, and sometimes it fills the cracks in reality with something darker. Eliza stood in the kitchen, cup of cold tea untouched in her hands. She hadn't slept in over 48 hours. Her skin felt paper thin, every breath heavier than the last. She could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, and beneath it, something else. Footsteps. Above her. In the attic. But the attic had been locked for days. Across from her, Mr. Tran sat at the table with a notebook full of Father Din's translations. He hadn't spoken in an hour. Just turned the same page over and over again. Mrs. Tran stared out the window, lips trembling, waiting for the figure that appeared every dusk and never blinked. And yet, among all the cowsed whispers, the disappearances, the unblinking watch, her own thought kept rising in Eliza's mind, like a splitter working its way to the surface. What if we're wrong? What if this wasn't Matthew at all? What if it never had been? That thought became a question, and that question became a plan, and that plan led Mr. Tran to the cemetery the next morning. It was a cold, gray morning when he arrived. Mist clung to the gravestones like frost. The cemetery was quiet, too quiet, even for the dead. He parked beneath the overgrown eucalyptus trees and stepped out slowly, boots crunching on damp gravel. The caretaker hadn't arrived yet. That was good. He didn't want witnesses. He didn't want questions. He wanted answers, and he was willing to dig for them. Matthew Tran had been buried in plot for to be St. Francis Memorial Cemetery. A simple headstone. Granite. A photograph of him smiling in the corner. It hadn't faded yet. Mr. Tran knelt beside it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He pulled off his cap and placed it on the ground beside him. "I need to know if you're still here." He brought tools, a small shovel, a crowbar, and gloves. He dug carefully, slowly. The soil was damp and heavy. Each shovelful took more out of him than the last. He paused often, wiping sweat from his brow, heart hammering. "This is madness," his mind repeated. "This is wrong. This is your son's grave." But he kept digging, because fear and love are closer than we like to admit. An hour passed, then another, and then, clink, metal hit wood. Mr. Tran dropped the shovel and dropped to his knees, scraping with his hands until the outline of the coffin appeared. Black lacquered wood, still sealed. He ran trembling fingers along the edges. No signs of tampering, no cracks, no disturbances. It was intact. He stared, swallowed, and reached for the crowbar. It took everything he had to wedge it under the lid. He wasn't a strong man, but grief had long since rewritten his limits. The crowbar groaned. The lid creaked. Dust rose. He braced himself. What would be inside? An empty box? Bones? Something else? He lifted the lid and gasped. Matthew's body lay exactly where it should have been. Peaceful. Eyes closed. Skin pale but preserved. Hands crossed over his chest, wrapped in the same blue hoodie they had buried him in. There was no sign of movement, no rot, no disturbance. He was dead. Truly, utterly, unmistakably dead. Mr. Tran stumbled back and sat on the edge of the grave. heart hammering so loudly he thought it might crack his ribs. Tears filled his ice-net from fear, but from relief and confusion. Because if Matthew was here, or what was watching them every night, he replaced the lid carefully, filled the grave in silence, didn't look back once. He drove home numb, wind in his ears, the same phrase repeating in his head. He's still there. He never left. But something else came. When he walked in the front door, Eliza was waiting. She stood in the foyer with eyes wide, shoulders tense. "Well," she asked, "was it?" He nodded once. Still pale, still shaking. "He's there, in the coffin, sealed, unmoved." Eliza exhaled sharply. "So it really isn't him?" "No," Mr. Tran said, voice low. "But he wears our son's face." Mrs. Tran walked into the room, rubbing her arms. "I saw him again just now, in the reflection of the microwave." Neither of them spoke. She looked at their faces. "What?" she asked. Mr. Tran couldn't meet her eyes. "Eliza," she demanded. "What happened?" "He's still buried," Eliza said. "His body never moved." Mrs. Tran stared, lips trembling. Then she turned toward the stairs and said nothing else. She locked herself in her bedroom and didn't come out until dark. That night, the fog came early. So did he. Matthew's double. He stood beneath the porch light again, unmoving. Mr. Tran stepped to the window. He stared at the figure, trying to spot any difference, any imperfection. But the face was perfect, even the birthmark near the ear, even the chipped tooth, even the fingernail scar from the 6th grade. Only one thing was missing: life. Eliza walked up beside her father. "You know what this means, right?" He nodded. "It means we called something else," she whispered, "and it liked what we offered." They played back the camera footage from the previous night. He was there again, standing in the same hallway, watching, never blinking. They watched the timestamp closely. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. No movement, just presence. A black, staring presence. Suddenly, the footage flickered. Static. Then, the camera feed showed the inside of Eliza's room. But they had no camera in there. The footage panned slowly and naturally smooth, toward her bed, toward her sleeping form. Then the screen went dark, then showed her face. Eliza, eyes wide open, lying in bed. But she wasn't watching the camera. She was watching something beside her. Then, the screen glitched. Cut to black. She stood, heart racing, backing away from the laptop. "I didn't wake up," she said. "I don't remember that." "That wasn't a camera," Mr. Tran whispered. "That was a memory. A memory from something else." That night, Mr. Tran placed a crucifix at every corner of the house. He circled the property with chalk and salt. He whispered Matthew's name only once. No response. But around midnight, the whisper came again, from the walls or the floor this time. From the radio. The kitchen radio, long unplugged. A voice, barely audible, crackling with static. "You opened the door. You don't get to choose who walks through it." Mrs. Tran finally emerged from the bedroom. She stood at the top of the stairs, eyes hollow. "I wanted to see him," she said. "No," Eliza replied quickly. "I need to see for myself." Mr. Tran took her hand gently. "I already did. You don't want that pain again." But she didn't listen. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the thing stared directly back at her. Then, slowly, it lifted its hand and waved. Just once. A perfect, familiar wave. She screamed. That night, they covered every mirror in the house, every window, every reflective surface, because now they knew the thing outside wasn't coming in. It was trying to pull them out, and it was getting closer. Not with footsteps, not with sound, but with familiarity. Every memory they had of Matthew, every emotion, every ounce of grief. The thing was feeding on it, becoming more like him every day. It didn't matter that the real Matthew was still 6 feet under. Because whatever was outside the house now was trying to take his place. Exorcism attempt. A local priest is called. That thing is not your son. The Tran family didn't go back to Father Den. He was gone. Vanished. No phone call, no trace, not even a rumor. Just a dark room in an empty parish and books left behind. Whatever had happened to him, he hadn't been able to finish what he started. So they called someone else. Father Martinla was younger, mid-40s, stern and skeptical. He wasn't from their neighborhood. He didn't know Matthew. He didn't carry their grief. But maybe that was a good thing. He arrived 2 days after the grave was checked, just after sundown, carrying a small black case, a wooden cross, a rosary, and a quiet confidence that felt both reassuring and completely out of place. He listened carefully to Mr. Tran's story, to the waking dreams, the standing figure, the coffin still sealed, the whispers, the cats, the candle, and finally, the hallway camera. He said nothing at first. Then, softly, after a long silence, "What you're dealing with is not your son." Mrs. Tran flinched at the words. Mr. Tran clenched his jaw. Eliza stared at the floor. "I understand what you've lost," Father Martin continued. "But whatever stands outside your home, whatever wears that face, is not your son. It's not even human. It's mimicry, ancient. A parasite that survives by being believed in." Eliza whispered, like a spiritual deepfake. He nodded. "And the more you engage with it, the more it becomes real. For you, for this house, for your bloodline." They prepared that night. Not just prayers and candles. Father Martin required isolation. One room, 4 walls, no mirrors, no electronics, no names spoken aloud. Because if the entity heard its name, it would grow stronger. That, Father Martin said, was rule 1. Do not call it Matthew. The family chose the old guest room. It had once been Matthew's playroom. Bright yellow walls, a bookshelf full of dusty comic books, old crayons still melted into the carpet. Now, it felt like a tomb. They cleared the space, covered every window, laid salt at every corner. 4 chairs, 1 for each family member, surrounding the candle at the center. And Father Martin began. The ritual was quiet at first. He didn't shout like in the movies. He whispered, a soft rhythm of Latin and Vietnamese prayer, steady, unbroken, calm. He lit a small vial of myrrh, anointed the floor with oil, carved symbols into the wax of the candle's base. Every few minutes, he'd glance around, waiting, listening. Then, an hour in, something changed. The candle flickered, but there was no wind. The temperature dropped instantly from warm to cold, enough to see breath. Eliza's chair creaked beneath her, and from the hallway, a footstep. Father Martin didn't look up. He kept reading. Another step. Closer. Eliza tried not to breathe. Then the voice came. Soft, familiar. "Mom, Dad." Mrs. Tran's fingers clenched around the rosary. The voice came again, through the door. "It's me. I'm scared." "Why are you doing this?" Father Martin raised his voice now. Not a scream, but a sharp rise in tone. "You are not welcome here. You are not of this home. You are not him." The air shook, literally shook. A low, vibrating hum beneath the floorboards. The candle's flame stretched tall and thin, then bent sideways like something was breathing on it. The door handle turned, then stopped. Click, click, click. Eliza looked at her father. He shook his head once. No sound, no movement. Then, bang, the door slammed inward. But the salt held. Nothing entered. Not visibly. But the room filled with screams. Not from one voice but many. Overlapping, high, deep, childlike, old, laughing, weeping. And underneath them all, "Why won't you let me in? Why did you bury me? Why can't I come home?" Father Martin stood now, holding his crucifix high. He began a new chant, stronger, louder, more forceful. The candle's violet flame turned white. The shadows recoiled. A gust of air slammed into the room, knocking over Eliz's chair. She hit the ground hard, wind knocked from her chest. Mrs. Tran screamed. Mr. Tran shielded her, but Father Martin didn't stop, even when the voices cursed him, even when the air turned so cold it cracked the window, even when the door began to splinter. Then, silence. The voices stopped, the wind stopped, only the flame remained still white. Father Martin sat slowly and whispered, exhausted, "That was not the end. But it's weaker now, it's exposed." For a moment, the family breathed. No voices, no movement, nothing watching. Father Martin collected his tools. He instructed them to keep the candle burning all night, to speak no names aloud, to never open the door for the thing again, even if it cried like a child, especially if it did. Then he stood to leave, and paused in the hallway. He turned back toward the guest room, his eyes wide. "I didn't open that window," he whispered. They all looked. The far window of one behind the covered curtain was now open just an inch, enough for something thin, or ancient, or patient, to watch. He slammed it shut, nailed it closed, sprinkled more salt. "This thing isn't gone," he said. "It's just hiding now." Then, just before he left, he handed Eliza something. A small wooden token etched with a symbol. "Keep this on you," he said. "It won't stop it, but it will know I'm still watching." And then he drove away into the fog. That night was quiet, too quiet. No knocks, no whispers. The family sat in the living room, not speaking. Mrs. Tran stared at the flame of the candle. Mr. Tran cleaned his glasses over and over again. Eliza watched the hallway, waiting. The silence felt like a trick, like the house was holding its breath. At 2 a.m., the radio turned on. A soft static hum. No station. Then, "I forgive you." Mrs. Tran wept, but no one moved. Then the voice again. "But you should have opened the window." The radio turned off. The candle dimmed, then stabilized, and they knew this wasn't over. It would never truly be over. But they had named it, denied it, weakened it, and now it was angry. Before vanishing in smoke, the entity whispers, "He didn't want to come back, but I did." The house had never felt darker than it did that night. Not because the lights had gone up, they hadn't. Not because the fog had rolled in, it hadn't. Not yet. It was a different darkness, one that came from the corners of the mind, from the questions that don't have answers, from knowing that something that looked like Matthew was still trying to take his place, and wasn't done. Eliza stood at the foot of the stairs, watching the last candle flicker low in the living room. It was the final one Father Martin had left. "Burn this only when it's near the end," he'd warned. "This one's not for protection, it's for truth." The truth, a dangerous thing to ask for, but sometimes the only way out is through. Mr. Tran sat in silence across the room, hands clasped, lips trembling. Mrs. Tran hadn't spoken in hours. After the radio message after the voice whispered forgiveness in Matthew's tone, something inside her had shattered. She hadn't cried, hadn't moved, just stared at the family photo on the mantel like it might start breathing again. Eliza had heard the voice too. She had felt it in her bones. "He didn't want to come back." Those words kept looping in her mind. What had it meant? If Matthew didn't want to come back, then what did? At 2:13 a.m., the candle flared. No wind, no open windows, but the flame rose to feet high in an instant, throwing monstrous shadows against the walls. The air dropped 10 degrees. The house creaked, groaned like something was inside the wood. And then, footsteps from upstairs, slow, heavy, wet. 1, 2, 3. Each step closer to the stairs. Mrs. Tran grabbed Eliz's hand. Cold fingers, fast breath. Mr. Tran rose to his feet, silent, and then he appeared. Not from the front door, not from the windows, but from the top of the stairs. The thing, Matthew's form, but not Matthew's eyes. They weren't even human anymore, too round, too black, too wide. No reflection, no blink. It looked down at them with the smile it had copied perfectly. And it spoke. I tried to be gentle. The voice was wrong, twisted, layered, like it was spoken through the throat of a corpse. It began walking down the stairs, barefoot, slow. You mourned so beautifully, you begged. Each step echoed, though the house didn't tremble. You kept calling him over and over, so I came. Eliza whispered, you're not him. No, I never was. But you made a space for me. It reached the final step, and stepped forward. This time, the candle didn't stop it. Mr. Tran stepped in front of his wife and daughter, heart pounding in his ears. You're not welcome here, he said. The thing grinned. You keep saying that, but this is my home now. Eliza lit the final candle. It wasn't like the others. As the flame caught, it emitted not warmth, but a pulse, a sound only the living could hear. The air shimmered like oil on water. The thing winced. For the first time, it looked angry. You want the truth, it hissed, even if it breaks you? The candle pulsed again, and the shadows split. All around them, images flickered into the room like dying projections. Eliza's 12th birthday, Matthew's final hug before the car ride, Mrs. Tran tucking him into bed the night before the crash. Then, the crash itself, the moment of death. They saw it, felt it. He hadn't suffered. He hadn't wanted to come back. He was at peace. And then came something else, crawling through the rift his grief had left behind. Not a demon, not a ghost. Something old, starving, homeless. The thing snarled. Do you see now? It stepped closer. Mrs. Tran sobbed. You wore his face, because you wouldn't let him go. Another pulse from the candle. It recoiled. Its face began to melt, not like wax, but like an illusion peeling. Matthew's features stretched unnaturally. His smile widened until it cracked the edges of the mouth. Eyes ran black. Its voice fractured. You should have opened the door, it whispered. Eliza stood, voice shaking. He didn't want to come back, but you did. The thing froze, the final truth spoken. And with that, the house screamed. Not in sound, in pressure. Every nail in the walls, every floorboard, every screw, vibrated. Books flew off shelves. Mirrors shattered from behind their cloths. And in the center of it all, the candle's flame turned blue. The entity shrieked, its mouth too wide, too open. No, it tried to lunge, but the light sliced through it, and as it burned, it spoke one last time. Not in anger, but in relief. He didn't want to come back, but I did. And with that, it vanished. A gust of dark smoke. Then silence. The candle dimmed, then extinguished, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt empty. Not hollow, not watched, just quiet. They stood together for a long time, not speaking. The memory of the thing's voice still echoed in the walls. Its presence still clung like damp fog in their lungs. But it was gone. Eliza whispered. We didn't bring him back, we just left the door open. Over the next few days, the fog stopped returning. The cameras showed nothing but darkness. No shadows, no watchers, just time moving forward again. Even the cats returned. Shudo, thin but alive, curled up on Eliza's bed one morning, as if nothing had ever happened. The radio stayed silent. The windows stopped whispering. They never saw the thing again, and they never said Matthew's name aloud after dark. Weeks later, they returned to the cemetery. Together, they brought flowers, photos, and a letter. Eliza placed it gently on the gravestone. Inside it read, We love you. We miss you. We let you go now. We didn't know, but we know now. They stood in silence, not in grief, not in fear, but in truth, the kind that doesn't twist, the kind that heals. And back at home, the last candle remained on the mantel, unlit, just in case.